something inspired, I suppose you could call it. Something that brought a slight smile to my face. So, before finishing undressing, I walked around, dimming the lights in the room, give myself a calm, low light setting to help lull me to sleep. And as I began to unbutton my shirt once again, suddenly the lights in the room grew ever more dim. Standing in front of my bed, I looked around as the lights grew dimmer, almost snuffed out entirely. And suddenly, from behind me, I heard a very familiar clicking sound. The sound of a pocket watch being closed. I turned around in the midst of the darkness, glared across my room to see a shadowy figure sitting upon a dresser at the far end, just beneath my clock. The tall, thin, slender form of a man wearing a pinstripe suit, looking down at a pocket watch he had just closed. Only now, in the darkness, the white pinstripes that adorned his suit seemed to glow, emanating an ominous red low light, like coals burning in a fireplace when all the fire had gone. And in that instant, his eyes looked up at me from his small pocket watch, and those two emoted a dull, fiery red glow. "Well, hello, young regiment," the man in the pinstripe suit said, hopping down from his perch upon my dresser and beginning to slowly, step by step, come ever so closer to me, the dull glow of his eyes and the pinstripes on his suit beginning to fade as the light began to return to the room. "So, have we had some time to think over what we discussed earlier?" the man in the pinstripe suit said, smiling, tucking his pocket watch safely back away. "The offer is still on the table. I can still make a great many great things happen for you, Reginald P. Worthington," he said, the smile growing ever larger on his face. I did my best to stand tall, adjusting my shirt and buttoning it back up. There's no need to look improper, I suppose. "So, young regiment, what is it that you want?" the man in the pinstripe suit exclaimed, beginning to slowly pace around my room, looking at pictures and books on the shelves. "I do, after all, have a great number of things that I could offer you, and all you need do is ask." I stayed silent for the moment, simply watching him pace and look at whatever he felt like looking at as he continued his speech. "But as I said before, young Reginald, I am, after all, a businessman," the man in the pinstripe suit exclaimed, beginning to turn around and walk towards me once again. Stepping very closely, he leaned down to look me eye to eye. "And as you, as a businessman, might know, no business, no profit comes without expense. Everything has a cost, young Reginald. But if you're willing to pay it, basically anything could be yours," the man in the pinstripe suit said, looking me dead in my eyes. At this distance, even with the lights on, you could still ever so slightly see a dull red glow in the back of his eyes. It sent shivers down my spine. The man in the pinstripe suit stood back up tall. "But I assure you, my prices are fair," he exclaims. "I most certainly won't ask anything of you that you're unable to give. Put quite simply, it's just an exchange. You give me something that I want, and I give you something that you want. That's how all business works, isn't it? So the only matter to truly discuss is what you want to get out of the deal. So, all you need do is name your price, and I will name mine. Afterwards, we can both shake hands and leave as gentlemen, each gaining our fair profit. What do you say, young Reginald?" I looked down at the floor for a moment. I clenched my fist, did my best to focus, try to arrange my thoughts. What would I ask him for? And suddenly, my archery teacher came to mind. That swindler. He spent 3 months of my life pretending that he was teaching me archery. And because I didn't know archery myself, I didn't know any better. I couldn't realize that I was being swindled. I clenched my jaw tightly, looked back towards the man in the pinstripe suit, ever smiling. Fair, I said. That's an interesting statement, considering you're dealing with someone who doesn't know anything. I don't know anything about the industry that you work in, or the services that you can provide. Quite frankly, as it stands, I'd say that a business arrangement with you would be anything but fair. The man in the pinstripe suit's expression changed. His wide, gritty smile, filled with teeth, suddenly rolled back to a far more serious expression. Those are some very serious accusations you're making, young man, he exclaimed. I assure you, I've been in business a very, very long time. And in all the years that I have been doing this, I have never once offered an unfair deal. There are many who would take serious offense to insulting a man's business practices. I looked up at him. I stick by what I said before, I replied. As it stands now, there's no way I could ever make a fair business arrangement with you. All the cards are in your favor. The deck is stacked. The game is rigged. The only one who truly knows the depth of what deal is being made is you. If you're asking me to make a deal with you under those terms, any smart businessman would tell you absolutely not. The man in the pinstripe suit's expression changed again, going from slightly perturbed to outright angry. He rapidly reached down, grabbing me by my shirt, and in a swirl of light and sound, I was no longer in my room. I felt heat, blazing heat, all around me. The man in the pinstripe suit kept his grip as I felt him press backwards, my feet beginning to drag along the ground, until suddenly there was no ground left to stand upon. I looked over my shoulder to see roiling hot magma, fire shooting up in all directions, black charred stone as far as the eye could see, the air itself burning hot, filled with embers. The heat was so intense it felt like my lungs would catch fire. With every breath, I looked at the man in the pinstripe suit, still clasping tightly to my shirt, my feet still kicking, trying to find ground beneath them, finding only a small perch of blackened stone. Do you have any idea who you're dealing with? I could make you disappear as easy as taking a breath. No one would ever know where you went, what happened to you. I possess power far beyond anything that your tiny little mind could ever imagine. Don't think you can swindle me, boy. I am not one to be gamed. My hands clasped onto the man in the pinstripe suit wrists as he held me over the edge. For a few moments, all I could feel was terror and heat. My heart pounding out of my chest, my feet struggling to try to find grasp of land, as I looked into the fiery red eyes of the pinstripe man. And in that moment, why or how is beyond me, but somehow I gained composure of myself. I clasped the man in the pinstripe suit's wrist as tightly as I could, clenched my jaw, looked deep into his eyes, and the next words I spoke brought shock to even his face. And how exactly are you supposed to profit from me after I burn to death in lava? It seems a man who burns all of his customers and fellow business cooperatives in lava wouldn't really make it that far, I shouted, over the sound of gushing lava and spouts in the distance. And as far as all the power you possess, using it to destroy me kind of only proves my point to begin with. The scales are uneven. One of us has leverage and the other does not. That is not a stance from which any wise businessman would ever conduct business. No arrangement can be fair when only one person holds cards. So, if you're going to drop me in lava, right now would be the time. Otherwise, perhaps we should discuss business in a more friendly environment. Unless, of course, you do have a way to gain profit from a dead man. Well, what's it going to be? I announced, doing my best to smile even amidst the heat. The pinstripe man simply looked at me, eyes wide, expression stunned, and then his stunned expression grew serious. I felt him pull forward on my shirt, and once again in a whirl of sound and light, of wind, I felt him spin me around and throw me. I had half expected to find lava beneath me, only to find the floor of my bedroom. My heart beat out of my chest, my breath raced, and I turned around to see the man in the pinstripe suit, leaning over, one hand circled around his chest, the other covering his face, and all at once what I might have expected: anger, disappointment, disgust even, being challenged by a child. I began to hear laughter. At first, ever so slight, a small chuckle under his breath, and then it began to build. The lights in my room grew dim again, flickering as they lowered, lower and lower. And as the lights dimmed, the man in the pinstripe suit's laughter grew larger and larger. It grew boisterous, overwhelming even, terrifying. The pinstripes of his suit grew more brightly red, emanating more and more light. Embers of what seemed like fire and ash emoted from his suit. Waves of what appeared to be heat and smoke rose from his body. All as the laughter, that insane laughter, grew louder and louder, deafening. The man in the pinstripe suit stumbled around for a moment, as if he could barely catch his breath in the laughter. Catching himself on one of the dressers in my room, his hand searing fire, scorching his handprint into the wood. And finally, the laughter began to subside. From the roiling, overwhelming laughter it had been, the insane, terrifying cackling, it slowed as the man in the pinstripe suit struggled to catch his breath through the laughter. With each breath he took, the lights in the room dimming and glowing, dimming and glowing. And finally, the man in the pinstripe suit stood tall, straightened his jacket, adjusting his tie ever so slightly, and looking over at me with a wide grin. "You, young man, are something special," he said, smiling intently. "You know, it's been oh so long since someone has ever bothered to question anything. It's always someone whining. I want this, I want that, I want to be skinny, I want to be pretty, I want to have lots and lots of money. And oh, it grows ever so boring. Always the same desires, over and over and over again. The same wants, the same needs, the same petty grievances. And in the end, no one ever cares how. No one knows why. As long as they get what they want, they're obliged to stay in blissful ignorance. Even those who do get what they want only question after. Do you have any idea how long it's been since someone actually tried to barter with me? To actually cut a deal instead of simply accepting whatever deal I laid out? Certainly enough I'm fair. I give them what they want at a fair enough price. But no one ever has the business sense to actually think about it. To think about what they could stand to gain. To actually challenge me on whether my opinion is truthfully what's best for them. Oh, how many hundreds of years has it been since I had a worthy business associate? Well, young man, you want to do business? The man in the pinstripe suit said, walking closer to me, kneeling down. Name your